Good afternoon, everybody. Just wanted to take a few minutes to discuss the most recent essay I published in the Reality Check newsletter, that being the one on German New Medicine. So, humanity has always had different opinions on how people should be cured, right? We had like this theory of miasma or like bad air in like the medieval era, and every culture kind of has their own idea of how to heal a person. Now, we have Western medicine now, which is very good in many ways, but it has its issues, right? It treats the symptom, not the cause, and it kind of just focuses on keeping people out of the hospital, keeping the pain down, and not treating the person as like a holistic entity, I suppose. So, I was researching like these different alternative medical theories, and people seem to be very interested in them. Right, so half of adults in Shanghai still believe in traditional Chinese medicine, which I would assume the rates would be even higher in the Chinese countryside. 80% of people in continental India still practice some form of Ayurveda, which is the traditional Indian medical system. And then as well, there's also like more recent ones that have been emerging. So 1796, we have German physician Samuel Hahnemann, who invents homeopathy. And then in 1895, we have a Canadian spiritualist, David Palmer. He invents chiropractic treatments, which, I mean, that's pretty accepted mainstream now. But it was kind of like a conspiracy theory back when he invented it. Now, there's one kind of new hot kid on the block, super popular on Twitter, and that's Dr. Raymond Peat, who has all these interesting ideas on how to like eat in your diet to like promote the thyroid, which he thinks is the cause for a lot of modern ailments, and then also the interesting ideas on how to prevent cancer. I don't know too much about him, but anyways, kind of viral at the moment. But one guy that seems to be overlooked is a 20th century physician from Germany, Dr. Hammer, who invented this system called German New Medicine. So the story goes, in 1978, his son is shot and murdered, kind of lives in the hospital for a few months, and then dies in his father's arms. Now, right after that, Dr. Hammer's diagnosed with testicular cancer, and was like, I was healthy before, so he was confused and tries to find like a link between the traumatic event and the disease. So that leads him to develop these 5 biological laws. I'll try to go through them pretty quick. Iron rule, that's the first law. Basically, it's like the underlying theme of the whole system, and that's that severe diseases originate from a shock event, which is experienced by the individual as being isolating, dramatic, intense, right? The second law, the 2-phase nature of disease. So that's every disease that results from a traumatic event has 2 phases. The conflict phase, right after the conflict occurs, the sympathetic nervous system dominates, and then once the conflict is resolved, you have the conflict resolve phase, go figure, and that's when the parasympathetic nervous system dominates. Third law, ontogenic system of diseases. So this one's kind of more complicated. The body, when it's first developing in the womb, has 3 primary embryonic germ layers: endoderm, ectoderm, mesoderm, and he says that those are like the interconnected systems in the body. So like, and they also correspond to different regions of the brain. So if you have, so for example, the brainstem or the endoderm controls breathing, food intake, and reproduction. So if you have a conflict that interferes with your function to breathe, reproduce, or intake food, then you'd have an issue in the brainstem, and the brainstem would modulate some sort of response in the body. For the mesoderm, we have the cerebellum, which controls movement and blood flow, and then cerebrum, which is like your forebrain, that comes from the ectoderm, and that controls the more social functions, right? So sexual conflict, separation conflict, and territorial conflicts, those sorts of things. Sorry, if I'm looking down, it's because I've got notes. Law 4 is the ontogenic system of microbes. So in germ theory, right, germs cause disease, but in Hammer's theory, he thinks that germs are just present at the site of disease and that the brain uses them to help heal things, and they actually aren't the cause of different diseases. So very interesting inversion of germ theory there. And then 5th law is quintessence. So it's the idea that, well, the 4 laws he previously just described kind of come together to form these functional units or rules of thumb that he calls special biological programs, SBS. And the body uses those as like common responses to solve these traumatic conflicts that we experience. So moving on from like the more technical laws, how can we describe German New Medicine? So the idea is that the body does things on purpose. So think about like when you go out in the sun for many days. Your skin tans and gets darker, right? Or, for example, if you get hot, your body sweats. These are like healthy responses. Well, Dr. Hamer says that when that happens at a cellular level, Western medicine just diagnoses it as a problem instead of seeing it as some sort of adaptation. So, like, if you have increased white blood cell count, it's called, increased leukocyte count, you have leukemia. Or if you have decreased bone density, you have osteoporosis. We diagnose those as diseases, but Dr. Hamer would say, well, that's just a response from the body because of some trauma or stress. So an example he gave, or somebody else gave, I think I just read secondary sources for this essay, but let's say that a baby is separated from its mother at birth. Well, the skin modulates that, or regulates that feeling of closeness or touch. So if the baby is separated from the mother, that would be experienced as traumatic by the baby, and they would develop some sort of skin redness or rashes. If the conflict is not resolved immediately or soon, then that SBS, or that program, would stay on, and then eventually the baby would be diagnosed with some sort of skin issue like dermatitis or eczema. Now, excessive cell proliferation, also known as cancer, is one of the things Dr. Hamer focuses on quite a bit because he got cancer. And so cancer is, according to Dr. Hamer, is caused when SBSs remain on for too long, and that promotes the growth of the tissue to compensate. So let's say that in a healthy deer, they smell a wildfire, they see the wildfire, they run, they have a fear of death. So they run, and the lungs kind of open up, the alveoli in the lungs open up to allow for increased breathing so they can run. Quickly, they escape the wildfire, and they're chill again. So then the alveoli close up. Normal response. However, humans might have this fear of death, just living and working in society, but it's very vague and diffuse. So it's difficult to know where it's coming from, and often it'll be unresolved for many years, right? You get this like chronic stress symptoms. In that case, the body kind of, depending on how the person interprets the vague fear of death, they also have this alveolar lung response to like open the lungs to get ready to run, but there's nowhere to run to because the thing that's causing your stress is that you have no money and your credit is bad and you have a mortgage. And so that SBS remains on for many years, and then you get the growth of alveolar tissue to support this fear of death, which results in alveolar cancer or lung cancer. So that all being said, Dr. Hamer is not very popular with the other scientists, right? He's dismissed as a quack, pseudoscientist, and for good reason, right? There's not a lot of literature that supports him. Well, to be fair, there's not a lot of people doing research on it, so it's hard to get literature to back you up when no one's researching it. And also his medical license was taken away, so that's not a good look either. But the reason that German New Medicine is kind of intriguing to people is because it's very intuitive, right? It makes sense. And also, Western medicine doesn't really have a lot of... it doesn't really lay claim to answer some of those questions, like the connection between trauma and disease, or why did a tumor appear on one side of the brain versus the other, or why does it happen, why did I get this diagnosis now as opposed to in a few years? Western medicine's like, well, I don't know, here's chemotherapy, right? Whereas German New Medicine answers these questions about like connecting lifestyle and experiences with the disease that occurs in the body. So while that may not always be true, it's an interesting way of looking at it. So I think, yeah, it's worth reading about. So thanks for watching. Probably talked too fast, but it is what it is. Subscribe to the newsletter. Thanks again.